Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Hey, everybody.
This is the early bird session, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, got
Yeah.
check 1, 2.
Early bird catch the crook.
Hey, James, when you do your session on incarceration, I had some experience with it. I might be able to contribute something. I spent 5 years working with ex-offenders and guys on work release, teaching them how to repair computers. And then they taught me loads more than I taught them about life in the joint, and life afterwards, and recidivism, and a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, but, the guy last night, man,
that was powerful, James.
Yeah, and I want to give that thing wings, because it's good information, man, from the inside, man. So
that's right.
Yeah, so I encourage anything you can do to help with that, because can you imagine just looking at the dark side of that whole interview? I learned a long time ago that to listen to what people are not saying, and it helps in a lot of ways. And I heard him saying, he said, "I've made up my mind. I'm not going back to prison." So open that up. And really, what does that actually mean? The Alamo one day.
I had a friend named Ross Shaka, and he was on the street from the time he was 6 years old, and he was always armed, even with a brick. Anyway, he ended up in prison several times for all sorts of things. Armed robbery was the last one he was in for. And he said at a certain point, he decided just what you said. He says, "I'm not going to be in prison anymore." And so he thought about it, and he figured the way out was not to join a gang in the prison. And there were 3 ways not to join a gang in prison. One was to become a minister. The other was to become a jailhouse lawyer, and minister, jailhouse lawyer. There was a third one. I think it was a teacher or something. So he did all of them. He became a great jailhouse lawyer, and he became an ordained Buddhist and a Muslim and a Christian preacher, all at once. And so he was, as a result, everybody talked to him, everyone, and brought their problems to him, and he continued his studies. He became quite brilliant, and he didn't go back to prison either. He helped found this group I work for called the Prison Action Committee, which was it was all made up of ex-offenders, and it had a good run of about 5-6 years.
Yeah. Is he still around?
Ross Shaka?
Yeah.
I haven't been in touch with him for about 6 years. And 6 years ago, when I was in touch with him, he was still working on the elections in Chicago.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you. You left out everything, but you said everything except politics.
Right.
I was gonna ask you, did he end up in politics?
He did.
He did. Sounds like John Unger.
Yeah, he was,
especially with the spiritual piece.
He was a revolutionary, and he and I went over to the jail, Cook County Jail, one day when they were releasing 28 guys, and so we went in to explain our program to them. So I gave a brief introduction to my job training thing. But Ross Shaka, he gets up and he said, "What you do, what the decision you make now is going to determine whether you get out of here or not." And he said, "One thing you have to understand is right now you are a $20,000 piece of meat. And if you don't, because that's what the prison system will make off of you if you don't do something. And so then he tried to offer them all these existential choices that they had to decide on if they were going to escape slavery. And it was brilliant, and you could hear a pin drop in the room when he was talking. All the guys got it, that, my program, the only thing I could brag about it is that generally 2 out of 3 people who go through these programs go back to jail. And from my program, only 1 out of 3 went back to jail. Because, I couldn't teach them everything. I could teach them how to fix computers, but there were lots of things in life that they needed to relearn in order to stay out of prison. Not to mention the economic system itself, But it was a great educational experience for me as much as some of them still stay in touch with me. Some of them went on to get great jobs with Motorola and other high-tech companies and got married and started families. They contact me on the holidays. So there's, I guess my point is that there's keep hope alive,
Yeah.
Even people who are really down and out, you can keep hope alive.
You can keep hope alive, man. Restorative justice. Look for the restorative qualities in a person and not the bad ones right away, and try and work with that part of that individual. Right. So I mean that's a worthy cause, man, and I would really love to join with me in that, to just keep taking a look at that and highlighting different parts of it.
It'd be interesting to. I wonder if Larry could arrange to get us the somebody from the warden side.
I had one day. My class had 50 people in it, and so one day 3 big black limousines pull up in front, and all these, tough military-looking guys get out, and out comes this one guy, and he comes into my class. He's the head of the Illinois Department of Corrections, the head honcho, right. And he walked in. He said he heard things about my class that were different than others, and so he wanted to know about it. And he decided to come check it out himself. So he had his bodyguards there and everything. So I said, well, first you should, why don't you, let the students here give you an earful about what they think about the Illinois Department of Corrections. So they were polite, but they gave him an earful.
Yeah.
So finally, he came over to me and I said, look, the real question is, why am I running this rinky-dink program that only helps 50 people when you could do the same exact program I'm doing in every prison in the state of Illinois? Before people get out, you could be running this. I said, so what, where's that at? And then he starts complaining to me, Billy, well, I only have $1 billion budgeted. It's all earmarked for this and that and the other thing. And I said, you just spelled out the problem, I said, we have to fight for what these prisoners want is they want you to follow the Illinois Constitution on prisons, which says the purpose of Illinois prisons is restorative justice. And that's right in the Constitution. And that's not the way the Illinois Department of Corrections operates. So I said, you got to get on your case, buddy. So that was my experience with the top warden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dignity and equal justice. You ever had a bully, man, take something from you at school, man, and you was trying to get it, you keep reaching and he keep putting it behind his back, yeah. I mean, and and he keeps jerking at you because he can cold cock you, but you need this thing back, because without it, there's no sense in you even going in the school building. So this guy's, I mean, and then you're 8 years old and all of a sudden you're 60.
I had a guy do that to me.
And you run into this bully.
Yeah.
And you kill him. Oh man.
He harassed me for about 6 months. So he was bigger than me and stronger than me. So finally one day I just got tired of it. I walked up to him. I said, Kenny, you're stronger than me. And so, but take your best shot. I said, let's get this shit over with. Just take your best shot. And
And that's what
I stood there and stared him in the face. And
yeah,
finally, he just broke out laughing, and we became good friends.
yeah. That's what's gonna happen. I mean, I don't know if Joe and Donald are gonna be good friends in the end. I don't know, or the American people. But the bully for the last 4 years, man, he took my money, and I couldn't go in the building, man. And now the door is open again. So those kinds of interviews are necessary. But the bully, man, just if you can look at that picture, man, on the playground, this bully, man. If anybody's ever been bullied, the country that was bullied, man, and we took, and this guy's still trying to fight, even though Joe Biden gave him a black eye,
right,
a big one too. I mean, he don't need a stake on his eye. He need a whole ocean to make the swelling go down. I mean, he need the whole cow pasture.
Many of you guys
to make that swelling go down. Oh my God!
Do you notice a difference in your the behavior of your pets since the pandemic started?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't. Well, part of it is, my partner left for 9 months to go take care of new grandbaby and a grandchild. She'll be back in April. So part of it is my dog misses her, but then that's part of the pandemic. The reason she had to go was because my daughter needed help, and she couldn't travel back and forth so easily because of the virus, and so he and I have been isolated. No people come over to the house anymore. If they do, we just we talk out on the porch a little bit, but so he wonders what's going on. He's kind of insecure.
Yeah, I mean, a cat sits in my chair all day now.
Yeah.
And when I'm surprised because he just was going to hang out here and be on the radio, but
yeah. Well, mine shows up. He starts tugging at me.
Yeah.
He doesn't really want anything because I give him all the water and cookies and whatnot.
Did either of you take a look at the tape of?
He wants to be part of the discussion. I guess.
Of course, right? Yeah. Did either of you take a look at the tape of the Summers and Krugman?
Yeah. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I got enough of it.
You need to have a conversation.
Am I wrong? I mean, I got the sense that I was listening to a not entirely, but somewhat staged debate. Because I got the feeling that there had been a meeting, and I think there's a picture of them having one right in October or in November, right after the election, but not before the inauguration. All these same people that are debating the stimulus matter, and right after they get done, Larry becomes an outsider, quote unquote. I mean, this guy's been the ultimate insider for decades. I mean, lecturing other people like Elizabeth Warren, for example, about, hey, you want to be on the inside and what happens? You want to be on the outside and just shoot rocks at it, blah, 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 that kind of thing, right?
Right.
And here he is. He goes out and he starts shooting rocks. But it has the kind of triangulating effect, right? It takes the debate and takes it inside the party. And if you listen to Summers' position, it's, it is a situation where there's high risk everywhere you look, And so reasonable people could, worry at different degrees about, and for different purposes, perhaps, about that. But I thought they were capturing so that rather than people paying any attention to the Republican objections or do nothing or whatever, they were watching, Larry debate practically everybody else on the team. Okay, that's how I kind of felt about it.
I was interested in one point he made about strategic strategic investment in infrastructure and things like that. I could agree with him, but even there, you have to dig down because a lot of that is comes out military spending comes into that. So you even underneath that you have uh, the tension between military industrial policy and green industrial policy, and which one do you want to invest in, and which one do you want to starve? Um, and so that so even though I could superficially relate to what he was saying, I had a feeling that he was not into green industrial policy. He would be more in favor of some more general thing, or for building us a new round of nuclear weapons as part of our strategic public investments. So, to prepare for more confrontations with China.
He hasn't been the worst on. He's not with the Post.
Oh, good.
Like Bezos acts like it's time to keep the Trump Cold War going, right? Just, Larry's not quite. He's kind of somewhere in the middle on that one, I think. And he didn't. It's kind of interesting, right? Because everyone's treading untrod ground to a certain extent, right?
Right. That's why I think neoliberalism is exhausted. That's my view. They have to come up with something new. They don't know what it is. Piketty's trying to help them redefine it or think outside the box a little bit. Bernie's always there. But I don't expect them to go on full on social democracy. But they got to come up with something new other than neoliberalism. I don't think it'll help it might just help a little bit to retreat to old-fashioned Keynesianism, but really they have to find something new because the neoliberal options are all bankrupt. They can't help with COVID. Can you imagine the neoliberal? So that was Trump. Go ahead, let the states and localities deal with it. There's your new neoliberal approach to COVID, which was disastrous.
Yeah, right. I know. Well, we're going to see how it shakes out here.
We're on about 3 minutes. You should have a few more guests, I hope.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I dropped the link to Fletcher. I told him if he wanted to pop in and say hello. He may or may not. I don't know.
Well, I think we'll see what happens here on this Saturday morning shift, and
Right.
it's been interesting political 2 weeks. I mean, it's really been interesting. You can already see the tensions and the contradictions that are there on several fronts. I think one of the more interesting ones is the $15 an hour.
I found I got just before I got on here, I was in a debate with a local working class woman. She had forwarded me this video from a guy in West Virginia, and he was ranting about how the government had moved all these black and white workers out of this housing. They were building all brand new housing for Syrian refugees. And it was going to be a new Sharia zone, and they were building a mosque, and we're going to give them $400 a week, and it was just he just went on and on. So I said, this is ridiculous. So I Googled it, and sure enough, came up on Scopes fact check. This whole goddamn thing was a lie. So I sent the link back to my friend, and I said, the whole thing's made up. There's not a word of truth in it. I mean, they are building some public housing, but they're open to everybody, including Syrians. And all this stuff about Sharia is just made up. I said, so she said, her real concern is that she doesn't think we have a future anymore. Which is interesting question. So I told her I thought we would get the future we fought for. So I encouraged her to study Bernie, and then I also encouraged her to study Jesus on how he answered the snarky lawyer who asked, "Who is my neighbor?" And I says, in a good future, everyone's your neighbor. So we'll, we'll see how that works out.
All right. Why don't we get ready to get started here? And first of all, thanks you guys for joining into the Saturday version. We tried to move it off of Friday morning to at least open the possibility for a little bit broader and innovative participation in discussions, which I think most people have felt that have been helpful in asking important questions. And we might wish for a little more political impact, coming out of the discussions, and I think struggling with that as a kind of weekly news commentary is a challenge we should speak to. I'm not sure that there's an easy answer to those kind of questions. A political organization is complex and got a lot of different variables going on. But I thought I would open up the discussion here today and ask the main question I want to ask. We've seen 2 weeks roughly of almost three of the Biden administration's and this ongoing crisis out of which we have not escaped, but there's a whole sort of different platform of events that are and institutions that are working right now that weren't working before. And there's a lot of different things that have happened in the week. One is the still not quite certain outcome of the impeachment trial. I think it's likely that Trump will be acquitted, but not entirely out of the park yet. We'll see, because it's going to happen today probably. Hold on, Larry's coming in. Let me get Larry in. And at the same time, Biden's going to launch a almost $2 trillion program, probably which he'll try to pass through reconciliation, and which means he needs 50 plus 1 vote to get it done. And in the meantime, that's generated, of course, controversy. It looks to me like the Democratic Party is trying to keep the controversy inside the ballpark for them, which is, I think, part of what's behind the debates between Larry Summers and everybody else on the Biden team. But it does the question of the high risks of the kind of investment that wartime investment, if you use Paul Krugman's term, that is going to be made by the government on outcomes that are not guaranteed. And certainly within the current institutional structure of the United States and its political structure, it's very difficult to see any easy path to success. And not that it should be, but I mean by easy, I mean even possible. The obstacles are immense. I think the acquittal of Trump, if it takes place, will be a sign of just how large the obstacle is. The attitudes of people about the minimum wage, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, the attitude about what is the action that needs to be taken, and what are the politics of that set of actions that can get it done. And that's where I say, how much socialism? Because there's nothing about the whole project on any front. I don't care whether it's the economy or the pandemic or globalization and the fact that no one's getting out of this disaster. No nation, no matter how powerful, is getting out of this alone. And the choices will be globally whether to cooperate or fight about, all the tensions, all the global inequality that's struggling in the midst of this crisis. So I'm saying that the socialist agenda is got an opportunity to grow dramatically, and it's something that people should not back down from. Um, but incorporated in my assertion of that is an assumption that I think I want you guys to comment on, and that's what I call pay the losers strategy. Um, there are every social good, every public advance that you want to make on climate change, on raising wages, on doing something about inequality, on peaceful cooperation with other countries. Every single question will involve more, not less government. Every single one. And so you're going to be faced with the fact that whether you want to or not, whether the corporations want to or not, the public direction of society and its scope and its size is going to increase. And I call that more socialism. And the only way it increases with fairness and justice is if you pay the losers, because all change, all economic change, causes a change in the division of labor in society. People have to change their jobs and do different things. And in order for people to have rising incomes, their labor must be of rising productivity. That must happen. A bill must be paid down the road. So that, all those things that you're doing can't be done except through the public direction and planning. It doesn't mean that everything becomes, you go out and nationalize shoeshine shops or even some big corporations, but it means you have to get public control over the direction of the economy and society so that it can have a harmonious future or not. That's my rant for the day, and I'm interested in other people's view of the first couple of weeks and the challenges, and especially what it means for your concept of socialism and the public versus private priorities of our society. Who wants to speak up? By the way, I would very much appreciate each of you who have expertise in certain different areas. For example, the healthcare crisis, or on the economy, or on our communities here in West Virginia, for example, where several of us are, an assessment of where the people are really at. I just want to say that last night James had on his recovery radio program a fellow who'd spent 45 years in federal prison and just got out. Got out a little while ago. And, one of the more, it's a powerful testimony, but one of the most profound things to me was, it's like if I had spent the last 45 years, like if I went back 45 years in my life, okay, and then it was like blanked out, and I walked out into what's going on right now. It would, I'd have to go back indoors, frankly. Anyway, who wants to speak up? Welcome, by the way.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I guess I'll jump right in here because
yourself, so the everybody on the tape knows, by the way.
It's James. I'm James. This is James Boyd. So good morning, everybody. Yeah, prison reform and addiction, substance use disorder. That's what I bring to the table, and how do I think that it's going to impact the country? The monies and what you were talking about, John, the economic situation, the changes. Well, we all know that stuff runs downhill. So sitting at the bottom, we got this thing called prison reform. Well, actually, what that is going to look like is people are going to be getting out of prison. I mean, it's already been okayed that you can let people out without vetting them because the president did it. I mean, he knew what people were about, but he pardoned them. So with all that being said, what happened last night on the testimony recovery radio, reentry radio, this man talked about some things that most Americans really they can't stomach it, so they're not allowed to see it. It's blocked. But he was released back into the community with a bag of clothes and a couple of dollars right off of television. And here we are in 2021. So that's just part of it. Prison reform. If we don't really take a look at what that's beginning to look like and what it needs to look like for everybody's concern and protection, because he said something last night that he said, I don't plan on going back to jail. What does that mean if they come for you? Right. So that's me.
I'd like to add something, James. I went back to work 2 weeks ago to ERJ. It's an entirely different place than when I went on leave a year ago because of the pandemic. And what John was saying about government ties in a little bit. But to speak to James's point, I'm a counselor. Almost all of my female inmates are there on some one or another sort of drug charge. They all are begging me to find them, to get them into the programs that are there, to get them into rehabs. And there's a lot of rehabs. There's Mountaineer Recovery, Point, there's Mid-Ohio. There's all these recovery programs, and a lot of these people, they go into a 28-day program and then into a long term if you can set it up right. And there are people working in that field, and James, I'm sure, is very acquainted with these people. It's difficult to get them out of jail and into treatment. It's not easy. And the reason, to go back to what John was saying, is efficiency. And efficiency in government is just down the old shitter. I'm in an institution and not in society very much because I don't go out, but I think that is the key. If you're going to spend a lot of money and put a lot of resources into government, it has to be efficient. If it's not efficient, it'll fail in the public eye. And turning these Trumpsters around, good luck. If Biden can provide them with enough benefit, some of them might come around, but I wouldn't count on it. They're too white. They're too uneducated. They're too angry, and they're too frightened. The Congress and Senate are scared shitless. They're cowards. They're flat out chickens. I would have no respect for them at all. Because they got no guts.
Okay, hold on. We got Dr. Aldis called by Mike.
Sorry. Okay, that's all I want to say.
Listen, no, you can come back anytime. Dr. Aldis.
Yeah, I was thinking one of the reasons that things stay the same and don't get much better is because we don't have the data and the numbers to show things. For example, opiate use disorder, addiction. We have lots of information of places being treatment facilities, okay? We don't have the untreatment issues. No one's collecting that data. There is no data that I know of anywhere which is telling us how many people in the Eastern Panhandle do not have access to treatment. No data. It's never been asked. It's never been gained. So we have all this wonderful information about rehab programs, by the way, which are worthless according to all the data I know, if these programs don't funnel people into long-term outpatient Suboxone or methadone treatment. That's just the data. That's the science. You don't have to accept it, but that's how it is. Okay, James will support this. So we have the data showing all these wonderful things people are doing. We don't have the data of the people who are just totally lost, getting nothing. You also have, for instance, the shots, something as simple as vaccines. We have all these shots being given. We have no data that I know of the shots not being given. We have little anecdotal stories, but no one's counting the people who don't have access to the shots, which is a lot of people, okay? So you're not going to fix something if you don't define with data and science the problem. Now, those are just two examples. There are many, many, many in healthcare, and James can support both of these points, I think. So I'm not against rehab programs, but I'm totally against their incredible cost and that they put people out on the street afterwards. It's just a waste of money. They're doing a lot of harm. The people who send them to the rehab center, oh, they're happy, happy, happy. Oh, the patient is happy, happy, happy. Fine. But if they don't get into a long-term treatment program, as James would say, what is it, James? After treatment, what? What next?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all. That's my rant for today.
After rehab, then what?
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
After prison, then what?
I think that,
Go ahead, Carl.
you know, they're very
Wait,
simple,
hold on,
simple
Carl.
things.
Mike was ahead of you. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. I'm not a cat.
Good morning, Mike.
I don't know if anybody saw the guy with the cat face. That was funny. He couldn't switch. Yeah, there you go. John is a cat. Just to let Mr. Bish know something. Just to push back a little bit. Not a lot, but 4 days after the incident on January 6th, 140,000 Republicans across the country switched parties to independent or Democrat. So just to let you know, it did have an impact, not the way they, and if they continue, I see them very much lost in the woods.
What's left then is the radicalized core, and they're dangerous. They're really dangerous. They're fascist. They're white supremacist. They're misogynistic, xenophobic. They are frightened to death that they're going to lose a majority in the country of in the demographics.
Right.
They're not going away, and they're being led by this idiot maniac. They're dangerous.
Okay.
Well, they're also too, it's interesting that, they're pushing all these, the QAnon lady, Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia. This did not come out until yesterday, has had numerous affairs.
Oh no.
And had they talked about that during the primary, a lot of people don't think she wouldn't be where she's at, but nobody brought it up because nobody wanted to investigate it because they were too busy investigating her over sensationalized crap about QAnon and, eating babies and or tearing their skin off and wearing them as a mask or whatever.
Carl's next.
Oh, I just wanted to add a little to James's. When people come out of prison, you can do a lot of very simple things that would enable their success. Number one is give them a telephone with voicemail. That way they can apply for a job and any replies can go to voicemail. Another is to give them a bank account with $1,000 in it, or even just give them a bank account with nothing in it. I had an ex-offender guy where I trained and I put him on a job, and he had earned $800. He did a very good job, so I gave him a check. And he said, Mr. Davidson, I can't do this. I said, what do you mean? He said, I can't cash it anywhere. I said, well, take it to the bank and open an account. He said, no, you don't understand. We can't get accounts, bank accounts. I didn't believe him. I took him over to my bank where I had written a check on him, and I asked him, I said, open this guy. They wouldn't do it. You see, to open an account, he had to have 2 forms of ID, one of which was a credit card. And no ex-offender is going to come out with a credit card. So finally, after a long struggle with some lawyers, we found one black bank in Chicago who would open up small accounts for ex-offenders. Because without that, they can't cash checks, so they're pushed into the underground economy. Another thing is places to live. So we advocated for a long time. Nobody really picked up on it. There was a lot of, unoccupied housing that's structurally sound, that's in need of upgrading. And why not give it as a place to stay for a number of ex-offenders usually in prison, they acquire some maintenance skills, carpentry, plumbing, and so on. I said you could put one trained person from the trade unions in there, and they could renovate the whole house while they're living in it. And then after they're done, they can sell it and make some money and then move on to another one. So those are some of the kinds of things we talked about, because what they need, very basic things when they get out. They need a place to stay. They need a bank account. They need a telephone number with a voicemail. They need an address. All those things are required to get a job. And like James said, the only thing I gave him was a little bag of clothes, and I think, well, I forget what it was in Illinois. I think it's $36 in cash and a bus ticket to your hometown. That guarantees you're going back to prison.
Yeah, part of my job is to give them a social security card. We print IDs when they're released, and I have all kinds of resources for housing. And so, we can make a case, but you're absolutely right. It's a struggle. They have to have Medicaid to get into a rehab, because the rehabs are so expensive. So, my job is to help them with those things. There's 650 of those guys over there and 2 counselors. So you can imagine how that goes,
Let me ask you a question, Larry. Take a typical person, take any person coming out of prison. Scott's after me. And, count up the cost in your mind that it would take to make more than half of those people in that situation a success.
The first thing you could do is stop. I'm sorry.
Whoa, hold on. And I want to not just cash. I mean, everything turns down to cash in the end. Okay, but like for example, a guaranteed job. If you came out of, and I don't think anybody but the public sector, on balance, is going to do that consistently. By the way, all right, unless you can take a private employer, but he's going to demand a big subsidy. He's going to see it as a risk. You're going to have to compensate him extra. It's going to cost you more than doing it yourself if you really wanted to do it. I mean, as a state or federal government. So I think the employer of last resort is an important part of pay the loser and make them become a winner. Because same thing with climate change. Go to the building trades and have them manage, the apprenticeships and allocations of work in partnership with maybe some trade schools, of moving labor from, the carbon industries into, the Green New Deal type stuff. Get the people and the victims involved in doing the thing. Pay the losers. Same with globalization. Do what Denmark does. Who is responsible for retraining workers whose jobs are lost by trade? The labor movement is. And that's the essence, by the way, of some of the more socialistic, like the Norwegian or Swedish public welfare funds, as well as China. They go after China a lot, for supposed forced labor. What that is a guarantee of full employment. Under socialism. And so, forced employment or forced unemployment. I would take your choice. So I think that in each of these cases, right, you're looking for a public sector, public leadership to come in, because I think if you count up that cost, Larry, it's going to be high on an individual basis, very high.
One of the first things and most important things they could do is drop the silly, crazy, absolutely ludicrous notion that we could ever have arrested our way out of this drug addiction epidemic. That's the first thing you can do. And so they don't go into jail in the first place, because really a lot of them don't belong in jail, they belong in treatment. As far as their reentry, there are reentry programs. By the way, John, it's Vivitrol is relatively popular among these addicts because it gets them away from the addiction, you know, so it helps. They have to get a shot every month. And it's sort of like day report, you know, they have to do that. I think as far as employing these guys, a lot of them don't have the skills to participate. You're right. And for them, there are people who hire felons almost exclusively. There are businesses that do that. I think another thing that you could offer these guys is let them get into business. They know how to make money. They know how to make money. The problem with that is the profitability of selling manufacturing. By the way, a lot of them are there for manufacturing drugs, and selling them is hugely profitable. They'll never make that kind of money in the workforce. Never. None of us do. I had a 15-year-old kid when I was in juvenile say to me, "You ever held $15,000? Well, I have. You know, what's he going to grow up like, you know, little Eddie?" I said to him, "Krieger, you know, I've known you for about a year, and I think that's the first time you told me the truth."
Right.
So it's way more complex. It's psychological, it's sociological, it's economic. These people don't end up in jail because they're bad people. And I think we'd all agree to that. It's just where they've been channeled in their life. So you start with the poverty, start with the growing up the street. I mentioned Yummy Sanders. Yummy Sanders, I wrote a paper in graduate school on street culture. And you grow up in a street in Chicago. Yummy Sanders was assassinated by two of his fellow gang members for being a snitch under a bridge. So they were both 16, you know.
Right.
It's way more complicated than
all right. Let's go around. I think Scott had his hand up at some point. Can you hear me, Scotty?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Okay. I was on and then it cut out on me. My internet may be a little unstable. Just to respond to John's rant, I'm a guy with a glass half full attitude, as I've said many times, and I really I think that this moment, the rising tide, led by the labor movement and so many other movements that are moving together, is just incredible, and I think it has huge potential for very important social change. And you know, first I want to say a few things about the labor movement. You know, never in our lifetimes, because most of you are at least as old as I am, have we seen the acceptance of the left, and I'm not just talking about the left in general, but you know, I think I've said this before on this program. Two of us who are on the international executive board of the retiree organization are known members of the Communist Party, and we were elected or appointed to these positions. I was, because we couldn't have a convention. Known, and people knew full well. But I want to give you another example. It's not just the steel workers. I'm also a delegate to the Chicago Federation of Labor. And we, is a complicated thing, but the Chicago Federation of Labor had not updated its bylaws in something like 10 years, or I don't know how long it was. And the AFL-CIO nationally wanted to check all of the federation's rules and everything, and make sure that all of the local and state federations were living up to the standards set by the national federation. And lo and behold, they found in the Chicago Fed Constitution, or whatever it is, rules, that it still had the anti-communist clause in there. And they told the Chicago Federation, you've got to take that out. You've got to modernize that. And so at the last Federation meeting, they did publicly announce that they were taking that out of the Chicago Constitution. And they also reported that Illinois had taken that out a long time ago, the Illinois Federation. But then when they took it, when they said they were taking it out, the president of the Federation said, oh, and Scott and Bobby, which is my wife, oh, well, they'll be so happy because now they're legally, Reds are legally a part of the Federation. And everybody just started applauding. It was just incredible. And I think, I mean, I really do think that attitude is growing, and the acceptance of the idea of socialism is at an all-time high in the labor movement and among organized workers. And I want to say something about the role that, the fact that Biden had a labor rep on every single issue committee that he had established before he was elected was really an important thing, because he wasn't just looking for, and I'm talking about international reps from unions, federations, stuff like that. They're all of, I mean, the top leaders of the AFL-CIO were on some of these. They were on these committees, and they got to say what they thought labor's stake in this issue. So that's the environment, that's healthcare, that's the fight for minority rights, all of those things. They were in there, and I just think that's, and you've already seen the impact in the NLRB. And getting rid of the Trumpian chairman of the NLRB and putting somebody in there who actually might support workers.
I think he fired all of them.
What?
I think he fired all of them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He did.
Not just
one. He did. No, I meant him, but yeah, you're right. He did. They're starting it all. Anyway, and then the last thing I want to say is that, this whole question of how we win people over, I think I think I've told people this before, but it was a huge issue in the steelworkers right after Trump was elected, because nobody wanted to offend their members. They were afraid that if we said what we really thought about the I was not one of these people, by the way. But anyway, if we said what we thought about Trump, that then, we would lose members in terms of the unity that we need in the fight. And I have to tell you, what finally was decided in the union, and it was a huge discussion, was that the only way to win, not one of the main ways to win people back who had gone for Trump, was to be seen on the front line of every single fight that the labor movement's making, and all of the different fights that are going on. And when we started doing that, I know from my own personal experience in SOAR and in the steelworkers in District 7 in Illinois and Indiana, we won back members who said, oh God, I didn't know he was doing that to Social Security. And all of a sudden they felt like here the union was on the front line. And that's what I think we have to do now. And I really do think that the upsurge that's taking place in this country as a whole is on the par of the upsurge with Roosevelt. And I think that that means we've got to be in the thick of that and push it and push it and push it. But we have an opportunity to make some really fundamental changes in the right direction. I'm not saying it's going to lead directly to socialism, but it is going to move towards building a huge movement that can move in that direction and winning some real things for workers. I mean, for example, and I think I've told people about this before, but the Mondragon, we're affiliated with the Mondragon, which comes out of Spain, and it's a whole cooperative theory and on and on. And we have helped open closed steel mills and put people back to work when what they were building was as a co-op. This is a co-op where the members call the shots in these co-ops. And what they were building was blades for windmills, to build windmills. And I think that was anyway, I think I rest my case, glass half full.
All right, so moved. Okay.
I'll have to rescind a lot of my negativity. This is just 2 weeks in the jail, and it does that to you. I agree. Roosevelt, we're at that moment, look, Biden's got transportation, energy, infrastructure. James, you work for Smart Recovery. Is that what you do? Smart Recovery. Okay, so that training for that job is online and it's free and it's good. And it's badly needed. And so there are things that we have to be creative. That's all.
Let me ask some of on the western side of the Alleghenies here points of view, whether Lou would like to weigh in here, and also Randy from the also over there in the Beaver County area. See whether I'm interested in everyone's kind of view of things 2-3 weeks into this storm. Lou, go ahead. Can
you hear me okay?
Yeah, now I can. Yeah.
Okay, my internet is terrible, so I apologize. But what I've been looking at is the workers down in Bessemer, Alabama, who have a union election going on right now. And I think they're doing it by mail, so they've got another couple of weeks to vote. And it's at the Amazon warehouse down there. And I think on the one hand, it's an uphill battle for them. Even if they win that election, as you know, John, it's going to be into the court system then, and it will then. There will have to be a strike to get a contract, and on it will go. But I also think about the steel workers going back to Roosevelt in the 30s, and there was a strike in Weirton in 1933 that was a failed strike. And I am not a cat. This is my cat. But then Aliquippa, organized and went to the Supreme Court. And by the time they got to U.S. Steel, the writing was on the wall, and U.S. Steel caved pretty quickly. So pretty quickly after 3.5 decades. And I do kind of wonder what it would look like if Amazon workers were able to organize and get better wages. And we've got a new warehouse nearby, right? I think it's on the Beaver County, Allegheny County line. So there's a lot of these workers, the delivery drivers now, and that could be a huge boost to a lot of local economies. And again, It will take a lot of time and some court victories and some other things, but that would be, that's my, that's where I'm hopeful and optimistic these days.
Just a quick thing on the Amazon workers. People know that there's a huge fight for them in Georgia. And the labor movement all over the country is sending people down to help them.
Right. Some volunteers from West Virginia too that are going down. Randy.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, great. Okay. My speaker was kind of, so, you know, you raise a question of how much socialism, you know, so I would say as much as conditions allow. And the conditions, assessing those conditions and what's possible in those conditions seems to me what a lot of the conversation has been about. And I think socialism is, you know, the social control of work, culture, economics, and money flows. And it doesn't really mean necessarily a revolution, storming the barricades and, you know, taking over the Capitol and throwing the, you know, the running dogs of imperialism out of office. I think it means, you know, expanding, you know, the boundaries, and, you know, and unionization is, you know, socialization of the workforce, and it becomes, you know, a unity instead of a bunch of individuals. In Progressive Democrats of America, of which I'm a board member, we are focusing on some foreign policy issues, because it appears that that is where Biden is stuck in neutral. The whole question of Cuba, the sanctions on Latin American countries, Iran, are, you know, a big issue now. And, you know, the whole point is just to go back to Obama's position as a starting point. And then, you know, what's really frightening is that a country with socialization of government and workers' power to elect government, which is China, is growing so rapidly that it's going to outpace the United States. And the question is, how can we deal with that? Now, I think more socialization of our workforce and our production, development of local manufacturing is the way to answer it. But the elite are talking about nuclear war with China. You know, major defense person made a speech a couple of days ago about we have to prepare for a nuclear war with China. We're spending billions on new nuclear weapons. But I think that's a major threat. And it, you know, it would really just make, create the socialization of mass death way beyond, you know, what COVID did. So I think that's an important focus now, because we need to maintain our physical existence and the social infrastructure to continue, you know, this development. So I think Biden is kind of like trying to play both sides, and you know, we need to just figure out how to push. His quote pro-labor stance, I think, is important. And, you know, as Lou was just talking about, taking advantage of that opening, we need a wave of unionizations going on. Oh, I think I've rambled on enough to fill my time up.
No, I agree with you. Let me ask a question about on international relations. I mean, part of this is from listening to Carl, your hammerist for a decade or two, but I really do. I finally agree with him completely that that the principles of peaceful coexistence adopted by the Chinese and the Indians and India, right?
Bandung
Right.
Conference.
And originating in a lot of the diplomatic stuff around also the the nuclear freeze campaign, we're going way back. But still, I think if you hang on to those principles and pay particular attention to, you don't interfere in the internal affairs of other nations. I mean, unless someone's crossing the border with respect, it becomes a national defense issue, really, legitimately. And I think that policy can get really difficult, no matter where your political sympathies might lie. For example, the Chinese did not break relations with Pinochet after the Chilean counter-revolution. And maybe there were material investment issues at stake. There usually are, but nonetheless, they defended it based on the principles of peaceful coexistence. Say it's an internal Chilean matter, even though you could argue about that if you wanted to. But and I think if you think about that now, that though that you can't answer every question. No one knows. I don't know what the situation of the people who live in the Chinese region of Xinjiang is. I haven't been there. I don't know anybody that lives there. I read all those reports going back and forth, but I finally end up in a lot of these situations, since I know how class propaganda works, and so that I have to say to myself, well, the best way to approach it is the non-interference, peaceful coexistence stance. Because it gives you time to find out, if it's really important, or if it's not, or if it's someone's twist on something or not. I mean, since when does the United States, with 4 times the prison population rate, I think it's almost 5 actually, of China, start lecturing, and with murders going on in the street every week? And we are going to lecture somebody else on. I mean, the Chinese would have to have public executions every day of the week in Xinjiang before we would really be in a position to say anything about it. So anyway, I think that foreign policy stance is peaceful is a good one. John, Aldis.
I have been to Xinjiang. It's a fascinating place. When we were there, oh Jesus, back in around pretty close to 2000. You're walking down the street and you see these people that look like they're from Turkey, because they basically are. And then you look across the street and you see some Chinese soldiers walking down looking like robots. These are 2 totally separate cultures. They're as different as anything can be. They're much more different than what we have here in the United States. If you look at people in Alabama and people in Boston, I mean, they're 2 different countries. But you ask the Chinese people themselves, don't ask the foreign policy people, ask the Chinese people themselves what they think about the United States lecturing China on human rights, the United States lecturing China on nuclear. We're the only people who drop nuclear bombs, don't forget. They know all this. The foreign policy folks don't talk about it very much, but the Chinese people, they know this stuff. I lived there for 9 years, and believe me, they know this stuff. So I think it's far better if we were to pull back and be a little bit more like China in that regard, and not be jumping into other people's domestic issues. I mean, I'm very sad that people in Xinjiang are being treated that way. I like the Muslims there. I like the Uyghur people are great. That food is weird but good. But we're not going to make any progress accomplishing that. In fact, I think personally, I think the harder we push that, the worse it's going to make it for the Uyghurs. I think if we're to back off, it would be better for them. The non-involvement in other countries' domestic affairs goes back to China, way back, right after the revolution, right in the very late 40s and 50s and 60s. Don't jump into other people's business. Tibet is part of China. Sorry, guys, that's how it is, okay? It's like Texas is part of the United States. It's part of China. And if China wants to mess it up, we're going to have to sort of let some things like that just happen. So anyway, that's my rant on that. I agree with you, John.
Let me
Let's
interject.
back off there.
I think that most of the anti-China talk is really aimed at indoctrinating the American workers so that we are, captive of a certain neoliberal mindset, and that we can't fight for our own interests because of the quote foreign enemy. Anyway,
I think that's right. Yeah, I'd like to jump in.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, just on a couple of points that have been raised. Talking about Cuba, in case people are interested, Pastors for Peace is sending another convoy or pilgrimage, or whatever you want to call it, to Cuba, I think in September. I'm thinking about trying to go if I can. A lot of that's obviously thinking about, what the situation is with COVID and stuff. But anyway, that's what they're aiming for, and they've already called for it. So if people are interested, and I that was a valuable part of moving towards normalizing relations with Cuba in the past, and it could be again, I think.
That's a great idea, Scott.
Yeah, well, they're really moving on that direction. But I also want to make another point about China. I've been to China a bunch of times, and I agree with John about the Uyghurs and all of that, and I do think that there are problems with that. But I wanted to say something about the socialism part of China, which it really is incredible, as people have pointed out, and it's just it just shows how socialism could work and can work, and I think that's just a very important part of what's going on. And my last thing, I've said this before too, but I always repeat the things. We have to look at the material base for socialism in a lot of ways, and we now have the productive capacity to take care of everybody on the planet, to give everybody everything they need, a decent standard of living, a decent place to live, healthcare, everything, that education, and to quote the what was it called, the Negro College Fund thing, a mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Right.
Think about some of these kids that are in these concentration camps and who they could be anyway, you get my point.
We used to have a saying in the UE that every time you went to visit your local state rep or congressperson, on behalf of, the locals in your area, that they would always listen to your agenda and say it's on my to-do list. They had numerous ways to say that, but that's what they would say, and we always interpreted that, or Jim Adams always interpreted that as, well, yeah, we have a to-do list of 5 items. This is number 5. We're never going to get past 3. They would shove you off like that, and you'd have a very hard time getting to the top of someone's to-do list in terms of any, serious progress. But I wanted to respond to one thing you said, Scott, about changes in the means of production, in the material basis of society. Yesterday or last week, Google was announced that Google is a quote visionary sponsor of the Python Software Foundation. There's other sponsors, but there's only one visionary sponsor. And Python is a open source programming language, probably with 60% of the data science application share, I would say, and maybe more, okay, as well as other domains. That's a big deal. And it's free. And it's maintained by a very large community of developers who get paid technically nothing for their work. And they do get paid one very important thing, and that's called reputation. That's why they participate. But the developers that participate and that Google now has as like a free store of developers that normally cost, 6 figures to hire, good ones, okay? And they're all going to be producing software for free. And we will not know, actually, because there's a lot of other open source software in Google, how much of its entire, quote, production is composed of free software. And free software means, in other words, there's a whole lot of labor embedded in a product, and that product was donated, like free capital. All right. Now, the only kind of people that can do that are people that are already making what Jim Barksdale, the guy that hired me at Netscape, said. He said, this was what, in the 90s. I said, all I have to do is pay someone $90,000 a year, and that will satisfy most people's requirements culturally, educationally, and materially. Certainly true in 1990. And they will do anything in the world that I need if I can inspire them. Anything. And Netscape was a perfect example of that. The workers were working 24 hours a day. People were living in their cubes, okay, because they felt like they were changing the world, and they were. And they were happy in their work, and they all had shares of the company, and most of them, by the time Netscape cashed out, including myself, were able to buy 3 or 4 houses with the profits. So, it was a great life. It was exciting teams, all right? The conflicts you had got resolved by commitment to a mission. And we got wiped out by Microsoft, who did all that work and gave it away free. But I just put, so there is at that time, so if you have people making $90,000 a year, the rest of it is gravy as far as creativity goes and innovation and commitment to work. You don't need to pay for the rest of it. It's a very interesting observation. But if you're making under the median, if you're making under $15 an hour, if you're making under $10 an hour, no such thing. No such thing. There will be no labor donated. There will be no covered. So how important, I want to ask you guys this, is the $15 an hour minimum compared to other, there are many other challenges that the administration is going to face and many other reforms. And then how important is the raising the wage? Carl.
I think it's very important for, an immediate shot in the arm for low-wage workers. But theoretically speaking, I wrote a piece back in the 1990s criticizing it. The problem with the minimum wage is that you have to have a job to get it. If you're unemployed or unemployable, what good does it do you? Maybe somebody in your family's getting it. That might help a little bit indirectly. So what I argued as an alternative, I did this when we were part of the living wage campaign that Acorn was running. I argued an alternative for the social wage. What we needed was a social wage. And what I called it was a universal toolbox. You could go to school as far as you want, as long as you want, and it would be paid for. You had health care, Medicare for all, and that every youngster would be given an $18,000, endowment or whatever to start life, to spend as they saw like in, going to school or starting a business or so on. And that everybody who wanted to work and create value, didn't matter whether it was a job at a market, they had just to create value, would be paid a living wage for it. That means if you were a student going to school and you were creating value by adding to your skills. If you were a mother raising 3 children, you were creating value. If you were a grandfather teaching kids to play basketball in the park, you were creating value by contributing to the public health. So everybody who created value got a minimum income. And I was against a universal income because you get the free rider compact that the lazy bone drug addict that or whatever, ne'er-do-well gets paid the same as somebody else who's creating value, and that's what kills it all the time. Even though that's only we're only talking about 0.5% of the people involved. So I tried to eliminate that by saying everybody who creates value gets a social wage, and the social wage is not new. It exists in a number of Scandinavian countries and so on. But if we had this in the universal toolbox, that we could solve the problem, we'd have full employment, and even if the market didn't provide jobs, you would have all kinds of the creation of social value and social capital being done, and there was adding to the overall thing. So it wasn't like you were just giving handouts; you were making investments. The social wage was an investment in the future quality and growth of the society and the economy overall. So I think the minimum wage is okay, but it's a palliative. What we really need is a social wage. That's a bridge to socialism, and that's what I would argue for among small numbers of leftists, and maybe before a union audience if they ask me. But I understand that it's not going to go very far. But I think it's a much better structural reform than just the minimum wage. The minimum wage takes money from the top and moves it down. The social wage restructures the economy in a way that enhances the power of the people at the base.
You sound a little bit like Larry Summers in his argument with Paul Krugman yesterday.
Well, like I've told you early on, there was on a certain superficial level, I was agreeing with one point he made. But if Larry Summers comes out for the social wage, I'll become a Larry Summers.
There you go.
Isn't it purpose? Anybody read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning? And everybody on this screen has purpose. I mean, he said if a person knows a why, he'll find a how. And so this personal development is way more important than a minimum wage, I think. And people allowed to follow their talents and their their inclinations and their interests, and not chase that dollar. I think that's part of what Carl was saying, you know.
Yeah, but can you think of any other issue besides cash in people's pockets that will be a better argument to those Trump supporters who are below the median income in the country? There are some. There are some white folks below the median that are voted for Trump. Not as many as
free community college would be good.
too many, way too many.
There are a lot of them here in West.
And my feeling is that if Biden puts money in their pocket,
Yeah,
it won't. You're right, Larry. There's some people that are so baked in, it's going to take a hammer on the head, to fix it, But, I think it'll peel away. I can't think of anything that will peel away more of those votes other than the cash check and the minimum and raising the minimum. I don't know if you can think of another one. I mean, the PRO Act is strategically more important. Okay, in a way, it is. But I mean, we have this immediate problem. If we don't get more unity among the working people, than we have had in the recent past, nothing's going to work without that. Okay, and like when Scott's talking about the way the labor movement is mobilizing, well, it better, and it has to. Okay, or the country's not going to go. They aren't going to get there unless there's broader labor unity. So. I don't know. I feel.
Yeah, it's not to say cash isn't important. I teach a class called Financial Freedom to these inmates. And one of the first things this guy says is save $1,000. Well, you can't save $1,000 if you need every single penny you make to put food on the table. And I'm tired of old phrase, but up to before I taught that class, I didn't know any of this stuff. I saved $1,000 and it was like magic. Next thing he said to do is cut up your credit cards. I did that. Amazing. My financial situation improved 100%. Oh, almost so quickly. My bank account just started filling with money. Saved 3 months emergency survival, something you can fall back on and keep your life going in times like these. It just sort of happens, but you have to make more than you need to live.
I know so many people who are not anywhere near that position. There are factories here that are producing products and hire hundreds of workers, all paid minimum wage. And their lives are so unstable, they can't even keep the damn jobs.
Right.
And I think yesterday, Christensen said that she would not support the $15 an hour minimum wage part of Biden's stimulus. So I think that's out, which is, I think very indicative of the problem we have with the oligarchy. They do not want a higher minimum wage.
Just a quick point. I really like Carl's social wage thing. I think we ought to raise it again in a big way. And I also think that if you look at, remember Yang's proposals, and there is movement in that kind of a direction that I think we should be taking advantage of, because there really is. Huh?
He's an interesting guy.
Yeah. But I mean, the fact that he got so much attention for that and a lot of people supported it is really an important part of what we're, again, glass half full.
There you go. All right. Well, I think if we could, they're going to have to do something on the minimum wage.
Oh yeah.
I think that if they don't do it, that's going to be a step back politically.
Yeah.
So, well, we're at an hour's point. Anybody last words here on the matter?
I want to make a point about Amazon.
Yeah.
You might appreciate this, John, but if you were to design a system under socialism for the mass distribution of consumer goods and services that included small businesses as well as large ones, and to do it quickly and efficiently, what would you come up with?
Amazon.
Exactly. So my point is, all power to the Amazon workers becoming unionized, but the real reform would be for them to take it over as a worker-owned cooperative, or as a or under social government as a public-owned enterprise.
Yeah.
Because it's a good example of what Marx meant about how within the shell of capitalism, it develops through socialized production and the advancement of technology. It develops the means of the new order.
Yep.
There was a fancy study done just a month or two ago that came out, related to why, if a company's a big share of the company's capital is invested in intangible production, okay, and its capital is so much human capital compared to fixed, machine and buildings and stuff, that the tendency toward monopoly is greatly aggravated, okay? And it has to do with the fact that there's a whole bunch of this value floating around in the company, right, that does not work very good as property, okay? It leaks everywhere, okay? You can steal it from and so it tends to, the big guys can steal more, frankly, okay? Look at what Google just did to the Python Software Foundation. I mean, that's, that I just can dip my little tentacles into this giant vat of talent, right? And take what I may and contribute, pay for a new version of C Python or something like that. And, well, I mean, it's magnificent, but it actually, I view it as the corporations drinking poison, right? They're drinking a little bit of socialism, frankly, and it's going to kill them in the end. I mean, and in the end, they're going to make a mistake, or some of their CEO is going to make a mistake, and they're going to have to be bailed out, okay? Because they made a private decision, and they can't, they don't have infinite insurance. And so they're going to have to be bailed out. And at that point, really, you do the Chinese thing and you appoint a state representative to sit in on the board of directors, and supervise, find out if someone's, stealing all the money. Hopefully it's not the guy from the Chinese state that ends up stealing the money, okay? But in any event, that is socialization. That's right. It is. However it happens. And so it's kind of like you're headed there, and there's nothing they can do about it in some respects. It's like he wants to start a big competition with China, but I noticed that the EU has not backed off of the big investment deal. And I also noticed this past week that the B&R, the Belt and Road new Silk Road Railroad, is landing in Hungary, okay, in the middle of Eastern Europe. Well, I mean, everywhere that thing has gone, money and development has followed so far, with a couple of exceptions, but pretty much, okay, the pandemic knocked everybody back some. But so, you're going to see the NATO bloc is not going to come back together like it was. And someone's going to have to be very creative. And I think pursuing peaceful coexistence, basically, and, you're going to have to cooperate. I mean, now everyone now says, well, how do you know the WHO is telling the truth about the vaccine? You hear that in some of the propaganda. Well, after you maligned the WHO past any organization's ability to tolerate it, and then meanwhile, the EU sort of dithered on the whole matter, okay? Well, China backed it. Guess what happened? You just handed over a global institution to your adversary, by your own stupidity. So, I mean, but that looks like a global, like continental kind of drift taking place, okay? It's not just individual decisions, but there's momentum.
But John, all of these big shots losing their jobs, at least we can guarantee them a $15 minimum wage.
Yeah, there you go, man. Or a social wage, if they can't find useful employment. Okay, there we go. All right, everybody. Thank you guys for participating. Hopefully, by the way, please, one minor business item, please get somebody, send me an email about somebody you want to be a guest to open up the next show, please. And
I've got a couple I've been working on.
I'm working on a couple too, but I haven't gotten anywhere yet.
So I can continue working on my novel, which is making progress.
Good.
Yeah.
1981, Springfield, Vermont, Scott. Okay, that's where it's set. You know.
All right, take it easy, guys.
The death of the machine tool industry. Bye bye.